Today we're going to draw this fun birthday greeting. Hi, I'm Diana, the artist behind Mimic Doodles. Welcome to my channel. Here's what you'll need for this project. I'm drawing mine in the Procreate app. You can use brushes that come free built into the Procreate app, or you can use the brushes from my wonderful Watercolors brush set. The color palette and more free brushes are available in my Doodle Squad library. Go to dianamcdermott.com/freebies. You can make your canvas any size. Mine is the size of my screen, but make it a minimum of 300 dots per inch on your resolution. This will ensure it prints nice and clear for any projects you use it for. If you're using brushes that are built into the Procreate app, you can use this brush in the calligraphy section called Blotchy. This will give you a bold watercolor texture in your artwork. I prefer a little bit more of a subtle texture, so I'm going to use the brush from my watercolor bundle that's called Heavy. Here you'll see the difference between the two brushes. This is the Blotchy brush. You can see it has a lot of texture and contrast to it. It's pretty bold, but you can always smooth this out a little bit using the Gaussian blur, but you will lose some of your texture. This is the Heavy brush from the wonderful Watercolors bundle. It also gives you that nice watercolor texture, and you can do glazing effects with this brush. So in my first layer, I'm going to use the monoline brush. It's also in the calligraphy section of the brush library, and create a really wavy rectangular shape for my background. This will serve as like the water layer where you would paint with watercolors in real life. You can wet your paper and then drop your paint in, and it creates that like beautiful watercolor texture and like magically spreads across the paper throughout the water. And that's what we're trying to achieve here. Create a new layer, and you'll use this to color your layer with a clipping mask instead of this pink. I'd like to change this pink to white. So I'll turn off my background. Then choose white from my color palette. And if you tap on this layer, you can choose fill layer, but first you need to alpha lock it, or else the paint will spill all over your canvas. So use 2 fingers and swipe to the right to alpha lock, or just choose it from this menu. Once it's alpha locked, you can click fill layer, and it will fill the selection with white. It will only go in the selection and it won't spill out all over the place because you alpha locked. Go to your new layer and choose clipping mask. I'm going to choose this dark pink that's in the color palette that's provided. I'm going to use that Heavy watercolor brush to color in my canvas, and it'll be clipped down on top of the white. So I'll turn it up as large as it goes, but you can see it doesn't get that big. It's big enough, but it'll require you to fill the whole canvas in one pass without lifting your pen, which can be difficult. If you'd like to make it a little bigger, you can resize the brush. So you can duplicate it and then tap on the brush to go into the settings. I always create a reset point for you so you won't lose your original brush. So if you adjust the settings and you don't like them, you can go down to about this brush and push reset the brush. It'll be reset to the settings in which you purchased it. If you'd like to make it a little larger, you can go to the properties section, and then you can adjust the slider under the brush behavior menu and just turn it up all the way so that it can get really large. And it's a good idea to duplicate the brush and work on the duplicate. Even though you can reset the brush back to its original settings, sometimes it's still nice to have an alternate version that you can quickly select and then use for like a larger brush size or whatever. When I color over the canvas, you can see that these texture marks are pretty vertical, but you can adjust that easily so you don't have these lines that are straight down. You just rotate your canvas and then scribble over, and then the texture will be angled. And then you could rotate it again and scribble over again, and then your texture will be angled the other way. And then you get this nice layered glazing effect with lots of texture and like just some variation to it. If you're using the Blotchy brush that comes with the Procreate app, you can see the texture in it is quite different. It's really intense and a lot of contrast in this one. So it might depend what look you're going for. This might work perfectly fine for you, but for a piece where I'm going to make lettering over the top, this would be a little bit distracting in the background. You can adjust this though if you go to the menu and click the opacity slider and turn it down a little bit, you can get a much more subtle texture. You can also go to the adjustments menu and choose Gaussian blur. If you slide left and right, you can adjust the amount of blur, but you can see you lose a lot of texture when you do this. Once you have your background set up the way you like, you can create your lettering. You'll need to set up some grid lines. You can go up to the Actions menu and then click on Canvas and Drawing Guide, Edit Drawing Guide, and then you can adjust your grid lines here to make them bigger or smaller so that you can write in a straight line. Another source I can recommend is the Grid Builder from Stefan Kunz. So there's these brushes that are stamps to create lettering grids, and you just stamp it on your canvas and it makes this nice grid line for you. This is his website. If you go to stefankunz.com, he has all of his stuff on here. He has online courses, brush sets, and lettering guides and all kinds of good stuff. He's also on Instagram where he shares a lot of his lettering skills. I'll use the arc brush from the lettering grid builder and stamp it for the lettering on the top, which will say birthday, the lettering on the bottom, which will say celebrating, and then in the middle it'll say R for. So the whole phrase will be birthdays, R for celebrating. So just make sure your guidelines are in their own layer, and then you can adjust them into the center of your canvas as you need to. And then I'll turn it down in the opacity here and then create a lettering layer on the top. When you're creating your lettering, just be mindful of the spacing for your letters. It happens to fit perfectly within this arc as far as the letters for birthdays. Just make sure the center is the middle layer of your middle letter of your word, and you can space out the rest accordingly. You can sketch your letters in so you have an idea of where you're going to be doing your lettering when you go for it with your real lettering brush. For my lettering, I'll use the wet mop brush. This is available in the Doodle Squad library for free. Create your lettering in a new layer. You might want to create each word in its own layer so you can easily move things around as you need to. You can recolor your background if you want. I wanted mine to be this pink color, and I kind of want my letters to match because I want it to look like I used masking fluid. There are a few ways you can do this. You can just make a new layer on top of your lettering and use whatever color your background is, drop it in, and then push clipping mask. Now it looks like your letters are masking fluid where the paper is showing through. This is a non-destructive way to create this. But if you're feeling adventurous and destructive, you can try it my way. Click Select, go down to your original white layer, that wiggly rectangle, swipe 3 fingers down and press Cut. This will cut out your letters from that original layer. Now it looks like I used masking fluid to create my lettering, and it doesn't matter what color I make my background, it will always show through, and I don't have to worry about changing the color of my lettering or a clipping mask on top of my letters. I can also save this as a PNG with a transparent background, and the letters will be like cut out of the design. Of course, once you do this, it's harder to go back because the lettering is literally cut out of your original wiggly rectangle design, but you can see how nice it is to be able to change colors of your background without going up and having to add lots of different clipping masks. Of course, choose whichever method works for you and works for your design. Kind of depends what you plan on doing with this. Now let's paint the party hat in the center of the design. I'm going to use the watercolor brush from my set, but you could use the wet mop brush or whichever brush you choose. I'm going to go with the light pink that's slightly darker than the lightest pink in this palette and paint it in with that, and then add colorful polka dots and that little pom-pom topper. I like to paint it in one pass without lifting my pen and leaving a little bit of gaps in the painting here and there just to give it a more textured and watercolor feel. Then I'll add in the polka dots and the topper with the other colors in the palette, like the light blue and the green and the orange, just to give it a fun festive vibe. Now you have a fun festive greeting you can use for a card or an animation or all kinds of fun things. You could go through and add a little bit of shadow to your letters or like 3D kind of like lines and just all kinds of fun stuff. I like it just like this. I'm gonna leave it as is and call it done. I hope this tutorial was fun for you and you enjoyed making this little greeting. If you enjoyed it, be sure to give it a like and subscribe before you go so you don't miss the next tutorial. If you post your work on Instagram, be sure to tag me at MyMcDoodle so I can see what you created. You can also find me at dianamcdermott.com where you'll find my illustrations and of course the fun freebies in my Doodle Squad. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.